Emily had planned a quiet night in her small Oregon home, hoping to end her long day with a warm cup of tea and a peaceful moment by her window. But everything changed the moment she heard an unexpected knock at her door, a sound sharp enough to break the silence in her house and send a small wave of worry through her chest, because no one ever visited her this late. When she opened the door, she found Mark, the 55-year-old neighbor from 2 houses down, standing under the dim porch light, looking both familiar and strangely unsettled. He was well known in their town for being surprisingly energetic for his age, always fixing something for someone, always moving with a kind of youthful spirit that made people forget he was older, yet tonight that energy seemed dimmed, shadowed by something she couldn't quite read. His usually confident posture was replaced with a tired slump, and his warm smile was nowhere to be found. Instead, he simply said her name, Emily, in a soft, almost fragile tone that made her step aside before she even understood why. She let him in because kindness came naturally to her, but as soon as he crossed the threshold, she sensed something deeper happening beneath the surface, something emotional, something he didn't know how to express yet. He paused inside her living room like he wasn't sure he belonged there, and Emily noticed how his eyes drifted around as if he was searching for a place to settle his thoughts more than his body. The air between them felt a little heavy, not uncomfortable, but full of unspoken truth, the kind that appears only when someone is carrying a feeling too large to hide. Mark finally admitted that he hadn't planned to come over at all. He had been walking around the neighborhood for almost an hour, trying to clear his mind, trying to outrun something that clearly followed him right to her doorstep. Emily, who had always thought of him as the steady one in the community, the man who fixed everyone's roofs and fences and problems, suddenly saw a different side of him, the human side, the vulnerable side, the side he rarely showed. The soft lines on his face looked deeper tonight, as if life had pressed a little too hard on him. And although she didn't know what had happened yet, she felt a strong pull to listen, to offer comfort, to be what he needed in that moment. His voice trembled slightly when he explained that the house he returned to earlier had felt too empty, too quiet, too unfamiliar now that his daughter had left for college, and even though Emily didn't fully understand the pain behind his words, she recognized the look in his eyes, the look of someone who had spent years being strong for everyone else and suddenly had no strength left for himself. She guided him to sit, her heartbeat picking up not out of fear but from a sudden awareness that the night was turning into something important, something she had not expected but couldn't walk away from. Mark's presence filled the room, not with his usual bright energy but with a quieter emotion that made Emily feel both protective and cautious. It was as if she could sense he was standing at the edge of a confession he wasn't ready to make. He stared at the floor for a long moment, his hands moving restlessly like they were trying to hold together everything he felt. Emily wanted to ask what was wrong, but she held back, knowing he needed to speak in his own time. Outside, the cold wind moved across the windows, adding a soft sound to the silence inside, and Emily felt the night tighten around them, almost guiding them into the next chapter of whatever this moment was becoming. When Mark finally lifted his head and met her eyes, she saw loneliness there, deep, quiet, honest loneliness, and in that instant, she realized this wasn't a simple neighborly visit, this was a man reaching out for connection, for warmth, for someone to sit beside him when the world felt too big and he felt too small. Emily didn't know exactly where this night would lead or what emotions it would reveal. But she knew one thing clearly: when she opened the door for him, she had unknowingly opened a door inside herself too, and now the night was moving forward on its own, carrying both of them into a moment neither of them had expected but both somehow needed. And as she sat across from him, waiting for him to share the truth behind his trembling voice, she felt the first hint of something she couldn't name yet. Maybe curiosity, maybe concern, maybe something warmer, but whatever it was, she knew the night had taken a turn the second he said her name at the door. The living room was quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock, and Emily could feel the weight of Mark's presence more strongly now that he had settled on the couch, though he did not fully relax, his hands twisting and rubbing together as if he were trying to steady a storm inside him, and she watched him carefully, sensing that the moment was building to something important. Something he had been holding back for a long time, because there was a pause in the air that felt like a question neither of them knew how to answer yet. Finally, he spoke, admitting that he had been walking for over an hour, pacing the streets, thinking about his life and the emptiness he felt after. His daughter had left for college, a silence in his home that seemed to echo every regret and every lonely day he had ever ignored, and Emily felt her heart tighten, realizing that this was not a simple visit but a man opening himself to someone he trusted, someone who had always been kind to him without expecting anything in return, and as he explained how the quiet had followed him like a shadow, she noticed his eyes flicker with emotion that he tried to hide, a vulnerability she rarely saw. And in that moment she understood that Mark, despite his energy, despite the way he carried himself in the world as strong and capable, was deeply human, carrying loneliness that he had masked behind smiles and helpfulness, and she felt both a connection and a responsibility, wanting to offer comfort and also to simply be there without needing to fix anything, because sometimes being present was enough. He took a deep breath and admitted that he had been pretending for too long that everything was fine, that life was manageable, that the house felt normal even when it was too quiet, and Emily realized the courage it took for him to sit there and speak so honestly, because she had always admired his strength from afar, never imagining she would see this side of him, and yet now it was right there, raw and real, and she did not look away, did not judge, simply allowed him the space to continue, to let the words flow. He paused, his voice softening as he confessed that being near her had made him feel alive in a way he had not expected, that the thought of opening the door to her home felt like opening a small window to hope after months of feeling closed in by routine and solitude, and Emily's heart began to race slightly, sensing that what he was saying went beyond simple neighborly visits, that there was a depth of feeling he was only beginning to uncover and maybe only she could understand. She leaned slightly forward, offering a gentle nod and soft words of reassurance, telling him he didn't have to pretend with her, that he could simply be himself, and Mark's shoulders seemed to relax just a fraction, the tension leaving his hands as he let out a slow breath, like someone who had carried too much for too long and finally set down the weight. The room was quiet again, but it was a different quiet now, one filled with anticipation, with the possibility of understanding and connection, and Emily noticed the subtle shifts in his expressions, the small glances, the hesitant smile that began to return, not the confident one he wore around town, but a softer, gentler version, the kind that revealed a longing for companionship, for someone to simply share a moment with without judgment. He confessed that he didn't want to intrude or make things awkward, but he could not ignore the feelings he had held inside, the realization that the house felt empty not just because his daughter had left but because he had been alone in his emotions for too long. And Emily felt a wave of empathy and something she could not quite name, a mixture of concern, admiration, and a hint of curiosity about what this night could become, and as they sat together, the air seemed charged with unspoken thoughts, the kind that make people pause and consider what is truly important, and Mark's gaze met hers. Steady yet uncertain, as if he were asking permission without words to let himself feel something he had denied for years, and Emily, understanding the depth of his vulnerability, offered a gentle smile and a soft tone, telling him he was welcome to share his thoughts and feelings, and that she would listen, that she would be there, not rushing, not pushing, simply present. And in that moment, Mark's eyes glistened slightly, a mixture of relief and appreciation washing over his features as he realized he could finally breathe without pretending, that someone could truly see him as he was, both strong and fragile, both energetic and weary. And the night seemed to stretch in that quiet, heavy, emotional space, carrying them together into a realm of connection that neither of them had expected when the first knock had sounded at the door, and Emily understood that this visit was more than accidental. It was a meeting of hearts that had longed for recognition, for understanding, for the gentle reassurance that comes when someone else finally sees you, and as Mark's voice softened even further, telling her he had never realized how much he needed this, how much he needed someone to simply be there, she felt a deep warmth, a shift in her own feelings, as if the room itself had transformed into a safe space for emotions that had been hidden, and the realization struck her that tonight was no ordinary evening, that this night had taken a turn that neither of them could have predicted, and yet it felt inevitable, the way two people's paths sometimes cross at exactly the right time to remind them that they are not alone. And as the soft ticking of the clock continued, marking the passing moments, Emily and Mark both sat, listening not to the sound of time but to the sound of each other's hearts speaking quietly, honestly, and the night continued, carrying them toward a place of comfort, of connection, and of the fragile beginnings of something tender and real, a moment that neither wanted to end but knew they would remember. a night when words and silence together created a bridge between two people, and that bridge held the promise of trust, of companionship, and perhaps even the first gentle steps toward love, or at least a profound understanding, leaving them both quietly aware that everything had changed the instant he had let himself speak and she had let him in. The living room seemed smaller now, or maybe it was just that the space between Emily and Mark had changed, charged with a quiet intensity that neither had expected but both felt deeply, as if every glance, every movement, carried the weight of unspoken emotions, and Mark, still sitting across from her, hesitated for a moment, then leaned slightly forward, letting his hands rest lightly on his knees, a subtle gesture that seemed to show he was trying to balance courage with vulnerability, because tonight he was not the energetic, always in control man everyone knew, but a human being who had allowed his feelings to rise to the surface, and Emily, sensing this shift, felt a soft flutter of warmth mixed with curiosity, because she had always admired him from a distance, his kindness, his strength, his steady presence in the neighborhood, but she had never realized that behind his silver hair and bright smile was a man who had a quiet longing, a need for connection that ran deeper than casual friendship. And now, sitting so close in this intimate yet gentle space, the reality of his humanity struck her with a new force, making her heart beat faster and her mind sharpen too. Every word he might say next, he cleared his throat softly and began to speak, slowly at first, as if measuring each word before letting it leave his lips, telling her that he had spent many years living a life of routine, of obligations, of appearing strong for others, yet inside he had quietly carried a loneliness he rarely acknowledged, a loneliness that had grown since his daughter moved away and the house felt too empty, too quiet, too hollow for someone used to being busy with others, and Emily listened, fully present, her eyes never leaving his face, catching the subtle signs of emotion, how his jaw tightened for a fraction of a second, how his eyes softened with a mix of sadness and hope, how his hands twitched slightly as if his body wanted to act out the feelings he could not yet voice, and she felt a powerful mixture of empathy and admiration, because opening up like this required courage, and it revealed a depth she had not imagined, a complexity behind the smile she had always trusted, a man who could be gentle, sensitive, and strong all at once. He admitted, finally, that in all the years he had known her, he had quietly admired her, her kindness, her warmth, her ability to make people feel seen without expecting anything in return, and tonight, with the house quiet and the world outside seeming far away, he realized that being near her made the emptiness in him recede, even if only slightly, and Emily felt a rush of emotion, a blend of surprise, recognition, and something she could not quite name, because this admission was sincere, heartfelt, and raw, unlike anything he had shared before. She reached out gently, letting her hand hover near his, not pressing, not forcing, just offering silent encouragement, and he noticed, pausing for a moment before letting a small, grateful smile appear, the kind that revealed both relief and cautious hope, because he sensed that she understood, that she welcomed his honesty without judgment, and in that instant, the room felt warmer, smaller in a comforting way, as if their mutual presence had created a shield against loneliness and the uncertainties of life outside those walls, and Mark continued, his voice low and steady, admitting that he did not know what the future held, that he had never been sure he could allow himself to feel like this again, yet sitting there with her, talking, breathing, sharing moments of silence and understanding, he felt something stir that he had almost forgotten, a sense of anticipation, a sense of possibility, a spark that reminded him he was alive and capable of tenderness even after decades of routine and restraint, and Emily felt it too, a flutter of excitement mixed with caution, knowing that what they were experiencing was fragile, delicate, and new, a moment that could shift everything if nurtured carefully, and as they spoke, they began to share memories and laughter, small stories from their lives, ordinary things that suddenly felt extraordinary because of the emotional weight they now carried together, the tiny confessions, the light teasing, the shared smiles, all weaving a bond that neither had expected but both could feel deep in their hearts, and the air seemed thick with the unspoken promise that this night could mark the beginning of something lasting, though neither wanted to rush it or label it too soon, because what they were building was more important than words, more important than expectations. It was pure, tender connection, the kind that grows slowly, quietly, and meaningfully. Mark finally admitted that he did not want to overstep, did not want to make things uncomfortable, but he could not ignore the truth of his feelings, that being near her brought a comfort and warmth that he had long denied himself, and Emily, hearing this, felt a mixture of pride, affection, and gentle longing, recognizing in herself a desire to be part of this moment, to be present for someone who had quietly touched her life in ways she had not realized, and she let her hand brush against his in a casual, unforced way, a gesture that spoke volumes, and he responded with a subtle shift closer, not too much, just enough to signal trust and appreciation, and in that simple movement, the emotional depth between them deepened, the room seeming to shrink until it was just the two of them, hearts open, emotions raw yet contained, a fragile connection forming that neither could ignore, and Mark's eyes reflected gratitude and hope, the faintest trace of tears threatening to surface, while Emily felt the warmth of understanding and care, a tender emotion she had not allowed herself to fully experience in a long time, and together, they lingered in the moment, exchanging words, glances, silences, all the while letting the night slowly unfold around them, carrying them forward into a new chapter of awareness and intimacy, a chapter filled with honesty, trust, and the quiet beginnings of love that was patient, considerate, and deeply human, leaving them both aware that the night was not over, that the emotions had only begun to bloom, and that when the morning came, the memory of this connection would linger, a soft, profound reminder that two hearts had found each other unexpectedly, gently, and with a tenderness that promised more than just a fleeting encounter. The fire crackled softly in the fireplace, casting a warm glow across the living room, and Emily and Mark found themselves sitting closer than before, the earlier distance replaced by a quiet intimacy that neither had rushed into but both were drawn to naturally, as if the night itself had guided them together, and Mark, for the first time fully at ease, let himself relax, leaning back slightly while his eyes remained fixed on her face, attentive, vulnerable, and open, because he realized that Emily's presence was a rare kind of comfort, a warmth that filled the emptiness he had felt for years, and Emily, noticing the gentle shift in him, felt her own heart respond, a mixture of curiosity, empathy, and a subtle excitement, because she understood that this moment was delicate and meaningful, not just casual conversation or polite company, but something far deeper, a quiet acknowledgement of shared loneliness and the beginning of emotional connection that could grow into trust, companionship, or even love. And as Mark spoke softly about how being near her made him feel alive again, how he had feared opening up but now realized it was safe to do so, Emily felt a wave of emotion, her chest tightening with the recognition that this man, who had always seemed so confident and capable in the world, was now showing her a side he had long hidden, a side that was tender, sincere, and entirely human, and she responded with gentle words, reassuring him that he could be himself, that she valued the honesty he had shared, and that she was not judging, merely listening and feeling alongside him, and in that shared space, a bond began to form, subtle yet undeniable, built on vulnerability, understanding, and the warmth of two hearts meeting in unexpected ways. And as the night progressed, they spoke less with words and more with small gestures, a touch on the hand, a shared glance, a soft smile, all of which conveyed emotions that words could never fully capture, and Mark, feeling the comfort and acceptance in her presence, allowed himself to close his eyes briefly, taking in the moment, feeling the tension of loneliness ease, and Emily felt a tenderness swell within her, a recognition that she too had been craving a connection, someone to share quiet, honest moments with. And as their conversation ebbed and flowed, sometimes filled with laughter, sometimes with silence, the emotional weight of the evening deepened, marking a turning point where both understood that they had discovered something rare and meaningful, a human connection that transcended age, expectations, and the ordinary pace of life. And Mark admitted, almost shyly, that he did not know where this feeling would lead, that he had not anticipated finding such comfort and warmth in one evening, yet he could not ignore the joy and hope that had been sparked, while Emily, hearing him, felt a soft glow of happiness, a recognition that sometimes the most profound moments came when life was quiet and unexpected, and together, they continued to share stories, memories, and gentle confessions, each revealing pieces of themselves that had been hidden, each gesture deepening the sense of trust, intimacy, and connection. And in the quiet of the night, the room seemed to shrink, enclosing them in a cocoon of understanding and care, a space where vulnerability was safe, emotions could flow freely, and the presence of another human being could feel like home, and Mark, sensing the rarity of this moment, smiled genuinely, a slow, heartfelt smile that reflected gratitude, relief, and a faint hope for the future, while Emily, returning the smile, realized that she had been touched deeply, not by dramatic gestures or grand confessions, but by the simple, honest act of sharing a night with someone who truly saw her, who was willing to be present, who offered warmth without conditions, and in that shared quiet, the boundaries of age, experience, and social expectation seemed to vanish, leaving only two people aware of each other, aware of the fragility and beauty of the moment, and as Emily leaned slightly closer, letting her head rest gently near his shoulder, Mark did not pull away, instead tilting his head slightly to meet hers, a silent acknowledgement of trust, comfort, and emotional intimacy, and neither spoke, because words were unnecessary, their shared presence saying more than language ever could, and the fire continued to glow softly, the night stretching gently around them, carrying them both in its quiet embrace, allowing time to slow, allowing feelings to surface, allowing the unexpected magic of human connection to unfold naturally, and as the hours passed, they became fully aware that this night had changed them, that something had begun that neither could have planned, that the ordinary had turned extraordinary simply because they had let themselves feel, let themselves be seen, and let themselves be present, and in that awareness, a profound peace settled over both, a combination of hope, tenderness, and the deep satisfaction of having shared a truly meaningful moment, and Mark, with a faint laugh, remarked quietly that he had never imagined a night like this could happen, while Emily, smiling, admitted that neither had, yet both knew in their hearts that this connection was real, honest, and worth cherishing, and as the first hints of morning light touched the edges of the windows, they remained close, savoring the final moments of the night, feeling a warmth and closeness that promised more than fleeting companionship, a quiet, enduring reminder that sometimes, a simple evening, shared openly and honestly, could become a turning point in life, a night neither would forget, a night that began with a knock on the door and ended with hearts awakened, spirits lifted, and a connection so gentle, so tender, yet so powerful, that it could shape the days to come, leaving them both aware that their lives had shifted in ways small enough to be subtle but large enough to be unforgettable, and as the fireplace's last embers glowed softly, Emily and Mark shared a look filled with mutual understanding, gratitude, and unspoken promise, knowing that this night, with all its quiet confessions, gentle touches, and shared silences, had taken them to a place neither had expected. But both were grateful to have found a place of emotional intimacy, hope, and the tender beginnings of a bond that could grow, flourish, and endure, carrying them forward into a future filled with the possibility of more nights like this, where hearts could meet, emotions could flow freely, and the quiet magic of human connection could transform ordinary moments into memories that would last a lifetime.